Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. And I kind of wanted to do something kind of fun and interesting today, and this is something that I've been looking into for a little bit, because I mean, you know me, I like my games, but I just wanted to take a look at the two Death Stranding trailers that have come out so far, just because I'm actually away at the moment. I'm not um, at home recording, and so I wanted to just put up a little extra video here because there was something that I found interesting and something that I wanted to do. So why not? And it was I like me my game theories. I like me my lore. I like me like going through and searching through games and looking for little teasers and little bits and pieces everywhere. And Kojima is a developer that seems to get that. Now, I'm not I'm not a huge fan of like Kojima's games. Like I played some of the Metal Gear series, but they never really stood out to me as my kind of game. Is all, and as a result, I've been aware of Kojima. I know that he makes great games and that his stories and some of the things that he does with them are really interesting. But I've never really been one to kind of seek out playing his games personally. But then you had Silent Hills, or the playable trailer for Silent Hills, come out, and that was far more in line with the kind of game that I'm interested in. It had arguably impossible space. It had this mystery involved. There was the horror aspect. I love me some horror. There were all those things, and it got me really interested in it. And then of course it got cancelled, and the whole Konami versus Kojima thing blew up. But then you've had Kojima come out with firstly the logo for his company Kojima Productions with the Homo Ludens thing, and all the speculation around that and all the interesting discussions around it. But then you've also got these two trailers for Death Stranding, his new game, his flagship game for his new studio, and I have looked and heard about all kinds of things that other people have been saying about it, mostly from kind of the people doing trailer reviews from like GameSpot and IGN and whoever else. But there are a few little interesting things that I noticed that I just want to throw into the discussion. Just add to things as we go along. Just because these things are so much fun to talk about, and until the game comes out, everybody's like view of it is going to be at least relevant in some way to the discussion. But without that, let's get into it, and we'll take a look. I'll leave the sound off for the moment, just so that I don't have to contend with dealing with it. But you've got this interesting quote from William Blake at the beginning in regards to kind of seeing microcosms. But now here we go with the actual trailer, and as many have noted, you've got this black sandy beach, which could either be somewhere in the Antarctic or somewhere up towards Iceland, where Kojima was looking for various bits and pieces, doing kind of scouting out places. But you've got all this sea life that's dead, but you've also got these tiny little like wires and umbilical cords. Now you've got these handprints instead of footprints moving through the sand, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But and they seem to relate into the other trailer, but here it makes it look as if this child is connected to Norman Reedus's character here, but that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case. But he's upset, he's cradling this kid, and I can't help but wonder if that's because he's connected to it, or just because he knows what's going to happen to it. Because the handprints along the floor, which are, as said, I'll comment on later because there seems to be a connection to the second trailer. There's something encroaching on whoever Norman Reedus' character is and this child. And as a result, you know, the handprints are fairly obvious. The child's there crying anyway, you know, and he seems, rather unsurprisingly, maybe sad that they're just lying there on a beach surrounded by dead sea life. But again, is that because he knows who this child is or is connected to it in some way? But who knows? It's up in the air. But then, like, I do like this little cut. Sudden realization, baby gone. But if we're taking this, the kind of black glue, the black goo, or the oily substance seems to be kind of a sign, because it's all over the beach. It turns up in the handprints. It's either the sign of something like a thing passing, or it's potentially blood. And you know, you've either got the blood running from the umbilicals of all of the dead sea life, or you've got it literally just being like a transmission medium. I mean, if you're thinking about oil generally, then it's a fuel. It's something that allows for power, but it is also something that can be used as a lubricant, as something to allow for more like ease of movement as well. And so, you know, you've had this child disappear, and the only residue seems to be this lubricant. And then, like, continuing, we've got the handprints changing from a fully grown human hand to these little baby hands, you know, wandering off towards these fish. Now, those dog tags, hold on, I'll get onto the scar that's in front of us in a second. But those dog tags, apparently there was a poster released as well, which had formula on them. I think one was the Schwarzschild radius, which is the radius of that a thing needs to be before it collapses into a singularity or a black hole, essentially. And then there was another one, which I can't remember what it was, but they're both linked to Einstein's theory of relativity, or one of the theories of relativity to one extent or another, suggesting like the little glowing handcuffs that are on Norman Reedus' wrist and the weird umbilicals, that we've got some kind of sci-fi bent to this, that may have kind of more cross-dimensional kind of movement between and things like that as part of it. But then we've got there we go. Yeah, you can kind of see the patterns on the edges of those, for want of a better word, dog tags there. But the scar, seemingly he's without an umbilical. He may have had one in the past, but no longer has one, so he's been set free. But then he's wandering in the direction that the baby went, but something else has drawn his notice, which is incredibly interesting. But, you know, as just a quick note, actually, the other handprints on him, just stop that there. The other handprints on him all seem to be kind of oily residue as well. But then we've got these dead whales and these icebergs in the distance, suggesting that, yeah, it could very well be the Antarctic, maybe more than Iceland, considering that you've got fairly obvious sea ice there, which is going to be more prevalent in the Antarctic than it is around Iceland, as much as Iceland is a colder, wetter place. But then you also have these patches of red kind of sat either side, which we'll see again later on. But then you've got these 4 figures up in the sky there, one of which seems to have either his arms crossed or arms pulled across the body, and then the rest, all of them have their arms kind of dropped down by their sides. But you've got Reedus here, who's the only living thing on this beach. I mean, we've got the Kojima part of the Kojima logo over there because the logo trailer had Moby Dick in it. You got a big white whale over there, but you know, you've got, he's the only living thing on this island apart from that baby. The baby is now gone. The handprints seem to have gone, although he has walked all the way across that collection of fish, so we can't see particularly well anymore. You know, he's moved a substantial distance, even though it doesn't seem like it because we were watching him at the time. And then you've got these 5 figures that are either looking down on him or surveying the area that he's in, and he's removed from them, though. He's the only living thing, and yet they're seemingly completely ignoring him, which in this trailer interests me, because again, if you're talking about kind of how Norman Reedus mentioned that Kojima basically said for Reedus to be him, and when asked about Homo Ludens or asked about all of the other things, Kojima basically says it's him. He seems to be suggesting that whoever Norman Reedus' character is here is going to be the player, and whoever the Homo Ludens is the player, you know, and he's going to continue to put this in a more open way, because it means that he can firstly prolong the mystery, but also because it's probably true. You know, if we're looking at things this way at the moment, if you've got those characters up there, those 5 individuals floating in the sky, then you've got this barren wasteland where things have gone to die. You've got this one individual who is stranded here, seemingly, you know, who has no equipment, no one else around, and who seems to be completely detached from whatever these other creatures were attached to. And if he's the player, then that means that those other 5 things are, you know, if you're looking at this as a game, which, let's face it, it is, then they're potentially developers, or they're opponents, or they are possibly even boss monsters within a story. You know, you've got this interesting kind of setup here, and people have noted that you can kind of, to one degree or another, kind of overlap this trailer with the next trailer we'll look at in a second, to get kind of a parallel. And you know, we'll look into that in a sec. But then, you know, as we continue through to the end of the trailer, he's stood there looking and probably being quite confused, maybe. But even these whales have these umbilicals coming out. And then, as we've got this large kind of open environment there, realise, actually just take note of these dolphins that are dead on both sides, because that becomes relevant later. But then as we watch, they begin to move, and then they just fade out and disappear, and then you've got the rest of the credits just rolling here for this trailer. Now, it's an interesting thing that they fade out at that moment to me, because now we're going to take a look at this other trailer, and I'm going to start pointing things out that are various parallels. I'll probably pause this video more frequently than I did the last, just checking how much time we've been recording for. But I'll probably and should be subscribed. I don't know. Anyway, we'll take a look at this one, and I'll probably pause this one a bit more because we've got more parallels running through this one. More little bits and pieces to look at. So first thing to look at is in the mud. We've got this rainbow, and it's been noted that that this, relative to in a couple of seconds when we see the sky, you know, it's very much in the mud underneath the ground. You've got underneath the black earth, you've got this other rainbow that's maybe the right way round, that's in a different sky or whatever else. But I'm not completely convinced by that. But again, we've got the umbilicals, we've got these crabs all lying all over the place. but we don't have sand now. Now we've got mud. And then instead of Norman Reedus, we have this baby, which could very well be an analogue for Norman Reedus, and we'll see why in a little bit. But then instead of the handprints, we've got footprints. And now, here's the interesting thing. Those handprints that were leaving oil in their wake. If you were a gamer, what do you use to control your avatar? You use your hands on controllers. So, if you were going to represent someone controlling an avatar in a different way, then it would be handprints, not footprints, that the player is leaving. Yeah? So, looking at this right now, you've got what we'll see is Guillermo del Toro's likeness being used. But then hold on. Now this is interesting because we've got the upside down rainbow, which has been noted by other people to basically be the kind of it's a lunar phenomenon for the most part, with where the moon is reflecting light through the atmosphere at about 20 degrees or something like that, and it causes this this kind of break in the spectra. But this is it's seems to be related back to the Kojima logo trailer, but that's neither here nor there. The more interesting thing, though, is these World War II kind of front rotor planes. And, you know, this place looks pretty war-torn. And the first thing that I see when I look at this is something like Battlefield or Call of Duty. I feel like this is a game environment. If the other world was maybe somewhat transcendent, I feel like this is essentially the real world turned into a game environment. But now here we've got Del Toro's likeness, and he's got this little pin there with I think it's United Cities of America with bridges written on it, if I remember from what I've read. But I think that's like a little an interesting little thing that might come up later. The thing that interests me more is he's got this lobotomy scar. And now, if Del Toro is being used, or it's not Del Toro himself, because he's not involved on the project. He just allowed his likeness to be used. But if this individual is the player avatar, so there is a player controlling this individual through use of the hands, as said, hands replacing footprints from the first trailer, then wouldn't it make sense that he can't think for himself? You know, none of our avatars that we use in games as gamers can think for themselves, really. And so wouldn't it make sense that if he's an avatar, if someone's controlling him, if he just looks like Del Toro but isn't actually him, as is actually the case, then it would make sense if this was the real world and he's been turned into an avatar, that he's been lobotomized, that he can no longer think for himself, that he no longer has his own personality anymore and he's just a tool. But anyway, moving on. I'd be interested to know what he sees when he starts looking somewhat shocked. Yeah, because he comes wandering back over this way, and then a single plane goes flying back. Again, I'm not sure if these are umbilicals or if they're oil or something. I don't know. It's hard to tell. But then he comes into this foreboding corridor or hall. But then here's something. Takes a couple of steps back. People have pointed out that there's a J carved into this rock here, and possibly another letter here that's somewhat more obscured. But I don't know whether or not this has any significance yet. It could very well be, because Kojima has said that there are things in this trailer that are there just to mislead people. You know, I wonder, or in these trailers that are there just to mislead people, I wonder if possibly the pin that this character that we're seeing here is wearing might be one of them, or whatever else, but we'll see. But now, again, we've got more World War II hardware with these kind of fleshy bits and pieces, but notice also you've got these bony arms and bits and pieces all over this tank as well. You know, it's almost as if this tank, with all of these fleshy parts and so on, is literally it's a living thing itself. And if you think about it, that wouldn't be far gone from a tank in a computer game, where, you know, the tank in the computer game doesn't have people inside. It's literally just coded to run on its own as an enemy, which would again make this rather interesting, wouldn't it? Where this tank is living of its own accord. But then you've got these undead soldiers, these all of them linked again with seemingly an umbilical running back from the tank itself into these troops. But these are kind of old World War II troops. If you look at the hand, they're actually skeletons. And again, you know, you've got these other World War II planes in the background. And again, I find it really interesting that you've got kind of these World War II characters here, that are obviously undead. But again, if this is a game environment, aren't these like just normal villains? You know, if you've got something that is gamified Earth, then, you know, doesn't it make sense that, you know, I mean, these are normal enemies, right? You have normal NPCs in game that respawn. They're essentially non-living. You know, they respawn. They do as they're told. They follow very strict paths dictated by things that they're attached to. You know, it's interesting. But again, then you've got this black liquid, which, if I'm right in regards to kind of the transit of something, or the empowerment. But then here you go, we've got the black liquid coming in, and again you've got the handcuff there, but I'm not sure if the handcuffs really necessarily mean anything unless there's a connection between the two. But then this is the point in the trailer where people are like, oh, this is interesting, because he links himself up to an umbilical, and the baby that just appears seemingly in this artificial womb, this glass material opens up, and you know, this is the point that people have been syncing up, so that it's like when the baby with Norman Reedus disappears, the baby appears with Guillermo, and so it's like you've got this moment here where you've got Norman Reedus's baby with, again, potentially the scar in the over the stomach there, the little cross scar, kind of. So the baby has disappeared, and then he's got up and he started moving. And but the interesting thing is, then you've got this umbilical that grabs it and drags it forward. So again, is that something controlling it, or is that something that is trying to connect to it even though it can't anymore? But then you've got this little interesting bit where it slows down, and you've got the little baby that winks, and they seem to hold a very similar pose for just a moment. But again, if he was connected to the big handprints, so he's being controlled by a player and was therefore leaving large handprints, and now the player has caused him to connect to the baby as a stealth mode to leave less of an imprint, then, you know, it's potentially an interesting mechanic. But then he goes wandering down. But then, look here, we've got these dolphins weren't here before. The water, the black liquid that came in and ran over his shoes, it brought with them all of these dolphin corpses that were on the beach, and realised that the doll is right here, just inside the mouth of the tunnel. It stopped moving. So this is the end of the trailer from the last one, where you've got the dolphin corpses on either side. He stood there between them, looking out into this, instead of open space, an enclosed space. But now we couldn't see where the baby had gotten to. Like the baby had walked off, but we didn't see where it had gone from there on, and now we're possibly seeing more of that. And we've got all of these again, undead troops up the top there, undead World War II troopers kicking around. But now he wanders off into the unknown and realises that the little baby is waiting for him there. It's not really going off by itself. But then it starts to glow. And this is part of the interesting thing, because it's got this red glow to it that we'll see again in a moment. I wonder if that is it connecting. But then, as you would potentially see the 5 characters disappear from the sky in the last trailer, you've got this other red glow here coming from deep inside this tunnel, and then you have these 5 characters appear here as well. But there's an interesting difference, because you've got these 4 out front who are all just the undead World War II soldiers. But then you've got Mads Mikkelsen's character, who's said to be the antagonist, who is in modern gear and is connected to all of these others by umbilicals. And the interesting thing here is, if you're a player character in like a first-person shooter campaign mode, yeah, something like Return to Castle Wolfenstein, even, you are potentially just another World War II soldier, but all of your equipment is better than theirs. And so I'm looking at this and I'm going, he's in modern equipment, he can use the modern equipment, and, as we'll see in a second here, when he removes his equipment, it disappears, as if it's disappeared as we would when we're carrying like a ton of different items in an inventory, but they don't have animations for carrying all of them. It just disappears. And he's marked with all of this black gunk again, which, if it's a transitory material or something like that, part of me wonders if this is if this is another player, if this is or an avatar of a developer, even, because he's got this fluid that is either powerful or transitory. He's got all of this equipment that he can use in a very similar way, and as we'll see in a moment here, he gives an instruction through seemingly the umbilicals, as a developer would, to NPCs in a game. Causes the little spin on the thing there, but then I'm not sure why he's basking for a moment there. But then he becomes aware of, realise all the other umbilicals underneath the water there, but he becomes aware of Norman Reedus' character potentially, but then realise he's clean here. So part of me wonders if we've cut out, I mean, he's got a little bit over his eyes, potentially still stained, but I gotta wonder if he's the developer, or if he's somehow outside, if he was the central floating character in the first trailer, then if he's aware of the fact that maybe Norman Reedus' character is one of the individuals, a player who's maybe connected or moved in or out of the system, yeah, because if he's Homo Ludens and is a and it's the player that is stranded in the game, as has been suggested by others, then, knowing that progress is being made, because he gives this very satisfied smirk here, and it's like, knowing that either Norman Reedus is maybe making progress, or that the player that he's going to capture, or that he sent those NPC kind of undead enemies towards, with Guillermo's character, maybe that's that's a thing that stands out. But otherwise, it's interesting to see that the black gunk is gone and that he seems very satisfied with what's happening. And again, that if he's very satisfied with what's happening and he's working with these supposed NPCs, then I can only suggest that he, as an antagonist, is maybe the person who is developing this scenario, who is the one who has built the game. And so, but he's always, that person is always the antagonist. That person is always the person who's stood back, and you never see them properly, and so on and so forth. They're always just kind of there. Their presence is always there, but you never really have a full connection with that individual. So I'm interested to see whether or not that is how this pans out, where you've got Norman Reedus as the player character, the Homo Ludens, the person who has come to play, and then you've got Guillermo del Toro's appearance as a player avatar, and then you've got Mads here as a more interesting villain that isn't necessarily really a villain, but is the game developer, is the person that's setting the events in motion. And again, realise that you've got potentially 5 developers floating in the sky there, possibly including Mads' character, and the player, the individual player who is having an influence on the game and doing things. You might be able to see the presence of other players, but you may very well not be able to interact with them. And the only presence that you are directly interacting with is the presence that is essentially an echo left behind by the developer. It's all very interesting stuff that I can't wait to see how it turns out. But again, this time, unlike the last time, you had the oil running off the bits and pieces here, whilst this is very just straightforward. It's very very kind of blank and plain, and so I have to wonder if maybe that's a suggestion that that's the real world. There's no transitory period there. That's just a thing. Considering some of the comments that Kojima has made around death and stuff in his game as well, and then we've got the Homo Ludens Kojima Productions logo there as well. But anyway, that was just me wanting to put that out. Having a chat, having a theorise, hoping to join some of the discussion as well, because this might very well be, considering PT and Silent Hill's disappeared, this may very well be one of the more the Kojima games that I really want to play, because as I said, Metal Gear Solid just didn't really click with me all that much, but this stands out as something that I at the very least want to pay very much attention to. But anyway, tell me what you guys think. I'm interested to hear how this might otherwise be interpreted. I've read a few articles, I've listened to a few people discuss it, and so on and so forth. And I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in, because I've not heard many people. I've heard lots of people suggest that maybe Norman Reedus is literally the player, and that there might be some otherworldly bits and pieces, and lots of the other bits and lots of the other stuff in regards to, oh well, yeah, this is how this is connected with the footprints and the handprints, or that baby doll is Norman Reedus' character, but no one's and I've heard people talk about the umbilicals as or the pipes, the tubes running between things, as relating it to coding and stuff like that, and kind of following paths for the NPCs doing games. But I've not heard anyone so far come out and just say, well, if you're looking at it all as like gaming analogies, then that makes Mads Mikkelsen as the bad guy, essentially the developer, which is interesting, considering that it doesn't seem to make him God as the full creator, but he seems to have there seems to be a twisted version of reality where the dead are walking, not because the dead are walking, but because they have been put into some kind of system that needs their raw materials. You know, Guillermo del Toro's likeness has been lobotomized because he's an avatar, and so there has to be a removal of self for the implantation of another self. You know, it's all interesting things. But anyway, tell me what you guys think down in the comments below, and thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.